Welcome, dear reviewers, to a world where the line between reality and nightmare blurs, and your deepest fears await. In this bone-chilling creepypasta video, we dive into the chilling tale of a teenager whose life takes a terrifying turn after discovering an antique mirror. Brace yourselves for Mirror of Shadows, a terrifying journey into the unknown. The sun cast a warm gleam over the bustling neighborhood as Jake wound through a yard deal. He wasn't especially curious about knickknacks or ancient furniture, but something almost the glint of interest drew him towards a weathered collectible reflect tucked absent in a corner. The reflect, surrounded in lavish silver, appeared to hold a secretive charm, and Jake's reflection called him closer. As he stood some time recently the reflect, Jake caught his possessed reflection gazing back at him with an ghostly concentrated. His hazel eyes bolted onto his doppelganger, incapable to tear himself absent from the interesting association that appeared to radiate from the looking glass. Reluctant but mysteriously charmed, he amplified his hand, probably touching the surface of the reflect. Abruptly, a shudder ran down Jake's spine as a shock of power coursed through his body. His reflection, once impeccably synchronized with his developments, began to move freely. It smiled wickedly, its eyes sparkling with the evil charm. Sometime recently Jake might completely comprehend what was happening. He was pulled into a parallel world, where the line between reality and bad dream obscured into alarming embroidered artwork. Jake bumbled into the parallel world, his heart beating in his chest. The once familiar environment were bent and mutilated, suffused with an inauspicious haziness that appeared to leak into each cleft. Shadows moved in an unholy orchestra, whispering perniciously as Jake's darkest fears took shape. In this parallel world, the reflect held incredible control, and it appeared to reflect not as it were Jake's physical frame, but to the profundities of his mind. As he looked into the looking glass, his fears materialized with frightening clarity. The reflect bent his intellect, uncovering the covered-up breaks of his awareness, and amplifying his most profound uncertainties. The primary appearance showed up within the frame of a towering, faceless figure, its stretched appendages bending in unnatural points. It lingered over Jake, its nearness choking him with an overpowering sense of fear. The disgust turned stale, and each breath felt like a battle against an imperceptible constraint. Jake's heart dashed as he realized that this tremendous being was an encapsulation of his fear of powerlessness and unstoppable drive that undermined to expend him entirety. Frantic to elude the clutches of his darkest fears, Jake set out on a tricky travel through this turned parallel world. Each step brought him face to face with a modern appearance, each more frightening than the final. The reflect tirelessly invoked his fears, driving him to go up against them head-on. He experienced a nightmarish adaptation of his childhood domestic, frequented by whispering specters that whispered his most profound insider facts. A bizarre sign of his fizzled aspirations insulted him, taunting his seen insufficiencies. The scene moved, morphing into a somber no-man's land where his adored ones changed into bizarre, noxious animals. With each experience, Jake's resolve faltered, but a glint of assurance kept him pushing forward. Within the middle of his nerve-wracking travel, Jake found glints of trust. He experienced parts of his claimed versatility, covered up underneath the layers of self-doubt and anxiety. As he stood up to his fears head-on, he uncovered an inward quality he didn't know existed. With each triumph, the haziness around him appeared to retreat somewhat, as on the off chance that his triumphs were gradually unraveling the malicious hold of the parallel world. At last, after what felt like an forever, Jake come to the heart of the parallel world to destroy, rotting castle covered in interminable despair. The reflect stood within the center of the castle's fantastic corridor, its control throbbing with a vile vitality. With a newly discovered assurance, Jake drawn nearer the reflect, gazing specifically into its profundities. As his reflection smiled back at him, Jake gathered each ounce of strength inside him. He denied to let fear direct his destiny any longer. With a disobedient resolve, he smashed the reflect, breaking the parallel world, and breaking the spell that held him captive. Wheezing for disgust, Jake found himself back within the yard deal, the recognizable sights and sounds of his neighborhood encompassing him. The collectible reflect lay in smashed pieces, its appeal quenched. A significant sense of alleviation washed over him as he realized that he had prevailed his most profound fears, rising more grounded and more flexible than ever. In spite of the fact that Jake's travel through the parallel world had been a bad dream, it had instructed him the esteem of confronting his fears head-on. He caught on that obscurity may be overcome, that the control of self-belief and versatility seemed smash the shackles that held him captive. As he strolled absent from the yard deal, Jake carried with him a newfound sense of strengthening, knowing that he had triumphed over his claim evil presences, and developed triumphant from the profundities of his darkest fears. Jake's strides resounded through the Purge Road as he made his way domestic, the weight of his nerve-wracking involvement still new in his intellect. The parallel world and its turn signs waited in his considerations, a consistent update of the obscurity he had confronted. Sunset slid, casting long shadows over the way ahead. Jake's pace enlivened, his heart hustling with an uneasy expectation. Each sound appeared opened up, each flash of development caught his consideration. The remainders of his darkest fears frequented him, awaiting nearness that denied to be effortlessly expelled. As he come to his front entryway, Jake stopped, his hand trembling as he embedded the key into the bolt. The entryway squeaked open, uncovering the commonplace consolation of his domestic. Yet, even inside the security of his haven, he couldn't shake the feeling that something waited within the shadows, holding up to jump. Rest escaped him that night. Each squeak of the floorboards, each whisper of the wind exterior, set his nerves on edge. The parallel world had carved its check upon his soul, taking off him until the end of time changed. The Merce Control had unleashed a Pandora's box of dread, and Jake couldn't offer assistance, but ponder in case it had genuinely been crushed. Days turned into weeks, and life continued its regularity. Jake attempted to persuade himself that it was all fair, a fantasy of his creative energy, an appearance of his most profound fears given frame. But profound down, a bothering question remained, a waiting doubt that the parallel world still held a bit of its control over him. At that point, one game-changing evening, as Jake gazed into the washroom mirror, he caught a sea of development within the corner of his eye. His reflection appeared to falter, its forms moving ever so marginally. A chill ran down his spine, and his breath caught in his throat. With anxiety, Jake come out to touch the mirror's surface. A surge of power coursed through his fingertips, sending a jar of fear and expectation through his veins. As his reflection looked back at him, a vile grin crawled over its face, mirroring the evil grin he had experienced within the parallel world. The lavatory around him misshaped, the dividers twisting and twisting in unnatural points. Jake's heart beat in his chest as he realized with a sinking fear that he was being pulled back into the parallel world, a captive once more to his darkest fears. In this bent domain, the appearances were more malicious, more tireless than some time recently. The faceless figure lingered bigger, its nearness choking. The whispers developed louder, insulting and tormenting Jake's rational soundness. The twisted forms of his adored ones clawed at him, their tremendous shapes a bizarre update of his possessed vulnerabilities. But this time, Jake was not without trust. The flicker of versatility he had found in his past travel burned brighter inside him. He knew that he had confronted these fears once sometime recently, and risen more grounded. He had smashed the reflect once, and he would do it once more. With recharged assurance, Jake pushed forward, his will a shield against the repulsions that encompassed him. Each step was a statement of resistance, a confirmation to his unyielding soul. He gone up against his fears with faithful resolve, denying to let them expand him. At long last, after what felt like an endlessness, Jake stood once more, some time recently the smashed remains of the Reflect. The turned parallel world trembled, its noxious hold extricating. With a primal shout, he come to down and smashed the remainders of the Reflect underneath his heel, destroying its control once and for all. As the parallel world blurred absent, Jake found himself back in his bathroom, his reflection returning to ordinary. A significant sense of alleviation washed over him, blended with a significant fatigue. He had confronted his darkest fears, however, once more and risen triumphant. From that day forward, Jake carried the lessons he had learned with him. He caught on the significance of standing up to his fears, of not permitting them to hold him captive. The scars of the parallel world would continuously be a part of him, an update of his quality and strength. As Jake ventured out into the world, he did so with a recently discovered appreciation for the light, for the excellence that can be found indeed within the darkest corners. He knew that obscurity would continuously exist, but he was not anxious. For he had strolled through the twisted halls of his claimed intellect and emerged stronger, prepared to confront anything challenges lay ahead. And there you have it, dear viewers, a spine-chilling journey into the unknown. Mirror of Shadows takes you on a nightmarish ride where teenagers' encounter with an antique mirror reveals the terrifying truth of their deepest fears. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more bone-chilling creepypasta tales and horror narratives. Until next time, stay safe and keep